The most dangerous betrayal is never the one that comes from a stranger. It is the one that arrives wearing a familiar smile. The late autumn sun poured liquid gold across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Whitmore penthouse overlooking Central Park, painting the Manhattan skyline in shades of amber and fire as Vanessa Brooks Whitmore stood before a mirror framed in crystal light. At 38, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who had built a life through faith, patience, and unwavering love. The deep crimson dress she wore flowed elegantly around her figure, the silk catching the fading sunlight like scattered rubies. Ethan had always loved this color. He once told her it made her look like strength wrapped in grace. The memory brought a gentle smile to her lips as she reached for the small, ivory envelope resting on her vanity. Her fingers lingered over it carefully, almost reverently. Inside were the words she had dreamed of hearing for nearly a decade. Years of doctor appointments. Years of hopeful prayers whispered into darkness. Years of holding each other through disappointment. And now, finally, the answer they had both waited for. Vanessa pressed a hand lightly against her stomach as emotion warmed her chest. Tonight was their 10th wedding anniversary. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building dreams together. 10 years of standing beside a man she believed was her greatest blessing. She imagined Ethan's face when she gave him the news. She could already see the disbelief in his blue eyes turning into joy. The thought made her heart race. Beyond the windows, the city shimmered beneath 1,000 lights beginning to awaken against the approaching evening sky. Somewhere below, car horns echoed faintly through the streets. Inside the penthouse, however, everything felt peaceful. Sacred almost. The dining room had been transformed for the occasion. White roses lined the long table. Candlelight reflected against crystal glasses. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Every detail had been planned with care. Vanessa glanced at the antique clock above the fireplace. Ethan was running late. Again. But tonight she refused to let that bother her. CEOs carried responsibilities. Billion-dollar companies demanded attention. She understood that better than anyone. She had spent years defending his absences, explaining his sacrifices, believing every late meeting was simply another step toward the future they were building together. Her phone remained silent. No message. No update. Just stillness. Yet she smiled anyway. Because tonight was different. Tonight she would give him something more valuable than any business deal. Something money could never buy. A family. She carefully slipped the envelope into her evening clutch and walked toward the grand staircase leading to the private level of the penthouse. Her heels clicked softly against polished marble. The house seemed unusually quiet. The staff had already left for the evening under Ethan's instructions. He wanted privacy for their celebration. At least, that was what he had told her. Vanessa reached the second floor and paused. A faint light glowed beneath the master bedroom door. Relief washed over her. Ethan was home. Perhaps he was preparing a surprise of his own. Perhaps he wanted this night to be perfect too. Her smile widened as she approached. In her hand, the envelope suddenly felt heavier, carrying not just a secret but an entire future. The future she had imagined for 10 long years. She stopped before the door and took a slow breath. This was the moment. The beginning of the happiest chapter of their lives. Or so she believed. With hope shining brighter than the city lights outside, Vanessa reached for the handle, completely unaware that everything she knew about love, loyalty, and family was about to change forever. The polished brass handle felt cool beneath Vanessa's fingertips as she slowly turned it and pushed the bedroom door open. At first, her mind refused to understand what her eyes were seeing. The room was illuminated by the warm glow of bedside lamps. The champagne she had placed there earlier rested untouched on a silver tray. The anniversary card she had carefully written sat beside it. Everything looked exactly as it should have, except for the two people standing near the windows. Time did not stop. It simply slowed until every detail became painfully clear. Ethan turned first. His face drained of color. His confident posture collapsed into something unfamiliar. Fear. Then Olivia stepped forward from the shadows, her dark designer dress catching the light. Vanessa's younger sister. The same sister she had defended her entire life. The same sister she had helped through college. The same sister who had cried in her arms after every heartbreak. For several endless seconds, nobody spoke. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the night sky. Inside, Silence settled over the room like falling snow. Vanessa's gaze moved from Ethan to Olivia and back again. She searched for an explanation, a misunderstanding, a reason that would make the impossible somehow reasonable. None came. Olivia lowered her eyes first. Ethan opened his mouth as though searching for words. Nothing arrived. The truth required no explanation. It was already standing before her. The envelope inside Vanessa's clutch suddenly felt heavier than stone. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of trust. 10 years of believing she was building a future beside a man who saw her as his partner, his home, his forever. She thought about the tiny nursery she had secretly imagined, the family photographs she had pictured hanging in hallways, the little hand she hoped would someday wrap around her finger. Every dream seemed to flicker like candlelight caught in a storm. Ethan finally took a step forward. "Vanessa," he began, his voice barely recognizable. She raised one hand gently, not in anger, not in accusation, simply enough to stop him. The movement was quiet, graceful, and devastatingly final. Ethan froze. Vanessa looked at Olivia. Her sister's eyes glistened with guilt, but even that felt insignificant now. Some wounds arrived too deep for tears to matter. Vanessa felt no desire to scream, no urge to create a scene. Strangely, the calm frightened her more than rage ever could, because somewhere inside her, a door had already closed. She carefully removed the ivory envelope from her clutch. The paper looked almost luminous beneath the bedroom lights. Ethan's eyes followed it with confusion. He did not know what it contained. He did not know that everything he had prayed for during the past decade was folded inside those pages. Vanessa crossed the room slowly and placed the envelope on the polished nightstand beside the untouched champagne. Her wedding ring caught the light as her fingers released it. For a moment, she stared at the envelope. Then she looked at Ethan one final time. There was sadness in her eyes, heartbreak, disappointment, but there was also dignity, the kind that survives even when everything else falls apart. Ethan took another hesitant step. "Please let me explain." Vanessa offered a faint smile that never reached her eyes. It was the smile of someone realizing the story she believed in had ended long before this night. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. Her heels echoed softly against the hardwood floor. Behind her, panic began rising in Ethan's voice. Ahead of her, only uncertainty waited. Yet as Vanessa stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her, she carried something neither betrayal nor loss could take away. Her grace. And somewhere inside the room she had just left behind, resting quietly beside forgotten champagne and broken promises, remained the future Ethan Whitmore would spend years wishing he had never thrown away. The elevator descended through 70 floors of glass and steel, but Vanessa felt as though she were falling through something far deeper than height. The city lights blurred beyond the mirrored walls as she stood perfectly still, her crimson dress untouched, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. A young couple entered on the 42nd floor, laughing softly about dinner reservations and weekend plans. Vanessa stepped slightly aside and offered a polite smile. Neither of them noticed the earthquake that had just shattered her world. By the time she reached the lobby, the first cold breath of November greeted her through the revolving doors. Manhattan moved exactly as it always had. Yellow taxis streamed through intersections. Street vendors served late-night customers. Towering billboards flashed across the skyline. The city did not pause for broken hearts. Vanessa climbed into her car and gave the driver a quiet instruction. "Take me to the Riverside Hotel." The driver nodded and pulled into traffic. During the 20-minute ride, her phone vibrated continuously. Ethan's name illuminated the screen again and again. 12 calls, then 15, then 23. Messages followed. "Please answer. Let me explain. This is not what you think." Vanessa stared at the glowing screen before gently placing it face down beside her. Some explanations arrived years too late. The Riverside Hotel overlooked the Hudson River. It was elegant without being extravagant, a place she occasionally used during charity events. The receptionist recognized her immediately and offered a sympathetic smile after noticing the late hour. Vanessa requested a suite for the night and took the elevator upstairs alone. Once inside, she walked directly to the windows. The river reflected thousands of lights beneath the dark sky. She removed her heels and stood barefoot against the thick carpet. Silence filled the room. For the first time since leaving the penthouse, she allowed herself to breathe. Not cry, not collapse. Simply breathe. Her hand drifted instinctively toward her stomach. A fragile smile appeared and disappeared almost immediately. There was still someone depending on her now. Someone who knew nothing of betrayal or disappointment. Someone innocent. The realization settled over her like a protective shield. Whatever happened next, she was no longer fighting only for herself. Near midnight, another call appeared on her screen. This time it was not Ethan. It was her mother. Vanessa hesitated before answering. "Mom." Relief flooded the older woman's voice. "Thank goodness." Olivia called. She said there was a misunderstanding. Vanessa closed her eyes. A misunderstanding. The phrase felt almost surreal. "Did she?" she asked quietly. "Sweetheart, families make mistakes. Do not make any rash decisions tonight." Vanessa looked out at the river. The disappointment cut deeper than anger. Her mother had not asked if she was all right. Had not asked what happened. The conversation was already centered on preserving appearances. "I need some time," Vanessa replied gently. "Vanessa, good night, Mom." She ended the call before more excuses could arrive. Dawn began appearing several hours later, washing pale silver light across the Hudson. Vanessa had not slept. She sat beside the window with a cup of untouched tea as the city slowly awakened below. Her phone buzzed once more. This time it was a news alert. Ethan Whitmore and Olivia Brooks had been photographed leaving a private charity function together 2 weeks earlier. The image filled the screen. Olivia smiling. Ethan beside her. Comfortable. Familiar. The article speculated about a growing friendship. Vanessa stared at the photograph for a long moment before setting the phone down. Suddenly dozens of forgotten moments rearranged themselves into a pattern she could finally see. Late meetings. Missed anniversaries. Unexplained trips. Conversations that ended when she entered a room. The betrayal had not happened in a single night. It had been growing quietly in shadows while she was busy protecting everyone else. The rising sun painted gold across the water. Vanessa stood and walked toward the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked older than she had 24 hours earlier. Stronger too. Slowly, she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the marble countertop. The small circle of gold reflected the morning light one final time. Then she reached for her phone and made a call of her own. "Good morning," she said calmly when the attorney answered. "My name is Vanessa Whitmore. I would like to begin divorce proceedings immediately." The divorce filing became public 48 hours later, and Manhattan reacted exactly as Manhattan always did. Headlines appeared before breakfast. Financial blogs speculated before lunch. By evening, social media had transformed 10 years of marriage into a spectacle for strangers to dissect. Vanessa watched none of it. She remained inside a quiet suite overlooking the Hudson, focusing instead on the single life growing inside her. The attorney handling her case arrived with a stack of documents shortly after sunrise. Most spouses fought for mansions, investments, and public victories. Vanessa requested something far simpler. Freedom. She reviewed every page with calm precision, signing her name where necessary and declining opportunities that would have prolonged the battle. Across the city, Ethan was discovering that money could solve many problems, but not this one. His calls continued. His messages multiplied. Flowers arrived at the hotel lobby and were politely refused. Private letters followed. They remained unopened. For the first time in his life, Ethan Whitmore could not negotiate his way back into control. 3 days later, a family gathering was arranged at the Brooks estate in Connecticut. Vanessa almost declined. Almost. But part of her wanted to hear the truth spoken aloud. The autumn leaves had painted the property in shades of gold and crimson when she arrived. The familiar house held decades of memories. Birthday celebrations. Holiday dinners. Summer afternoons filled with laughter. Yet as she stepped through the front door, it felt strangely unfamiliar. Her parents sat in the living room. Olivia occupied the sofa near the fireplace. Ethan stood near the windows. Everyone rose when Vanessa entered. Nobody smiled. Nobody knew how. The silence stretched. Finally, her father cleared his throat. "We are here to find a solution." Vanessa almost laughed at the choice of words. A solution. As though betrayal were a business inconvenience. As though loyalty could be repaired with compromise. Olivia spoke first. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Vanessa, I never wanted this to happen." Vanessa studied her younger sister quietly. "Then why did it?" Olivia lowered her gaze. No answer came. Ethan stepped forward. He looked exhausted. The confident billionaire who commanded boardrooms around the world seemed suddenly diminished. I made a terrible mistake. Vanessa remained silent. I will spend the rest of my life making it right. The words hung in the room. Her mother immediately nodded as though hope had returned. Her father looked relieved. Olivia appeared grateful. Everyone seemed eager for forgiveness. Everyone except the person who had actually been betrayed. Vanessa glanced around the room and finally understood something painful. They were not gathered to protect her heart. They were gathered to preserve the family image, to restore comfort, to erase consequences. Her hand rested lightly against her stomach. The gesture was small enough that nobody noticed. "There is nothing left to repair," she said softly. Her mother's eyes widened. "Vanessa, do not throw away 10 years. Vanessa met her gaze. "I am not the one who threw them away." Silence returned. Heavy, unavoidable. Ethan looked as though the words had physically struck him. Yet Vanessa felt no satisfaction. Only clarity. The woman who entered this house years ago as a hopeful bride no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who finally understood that dignity sometimes required walking away. She picked up her coat and moved toward the door. No one stopped her this time. Outside, the cold November wind carried leaves across the driveway. Behind her stood a family trying to hold together a picture that had already shattered. Ahead of her waited uncertainty, loneliness, and a future she had never planned. But as Vanessa stepped toward her car beneath the fading afternoon light, she realized something extraordinary. For the first time in many years, her life belonged entirely to her. Chicago greeted Vanessa with lake winds, unfamiliar streets, and the kind of anonymity that felt like mercy. 6 weeks after filing for divorce, she left New York before sunrise with 2 suitcases, a handful of personal belongings, and a future that existed only as a heartbeat beneath her own. She rented a modest brownstone on a quiet tree-lined street in Lincoln Park, far from cameras, charity galas, and whispered conversations about billionaire scandals. The house was smaller than any home she had lived in during the past decade, yet every room felt lighter. Honest. Free from memories she no longer wished to carry. Winter arrived early that year. Snow dusted rooftops while Vanessa slowly built a new routine. Mornings began with tea beside the kitchen window. Afternoons were spent consulting for nonprofit organizations and mentoring young women launching community programs. Evenings belonged to silence and healing. There were difficult days. Some mornings, she woke reaching instinctively toward the empty side of the bed before remembering she was alone. Other days, grief arrived unexpectedly through a song, a photograph, or the sight of a couple holding hands across a crowded street. But each time sadness appeared, she reminded herself of the small life depending on her strength. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. Her doctor described the baby as healthy and strong. Those words became treasures Vanessa carried everywhere. She attended every appointment alone, yet she never felt lonely inside those examination rooms. Each heartbeat echoing through the speakers sounded like hope rebuilding itself. Meanwhile, New York continued without her. Friends occasionally sent messages updating her on events she no longer followed. Ethan and Olivia had become increasingly visible together. Society magazines photographed them attending charity functions and business events. The images no longer pierced her heart the way they once would have. They simply confirmed that leaving had been the correct decision. The final divorce papers arrived in early spring. Vanessa signed them at her dining room table while sunlight streamed through the windows. There were no tears, no dramatic speeches, just a pen moving across paper and the quiet closing of a chapter that had already ended months earlier. When the courier left, she walked to the nearby lakefront and watched sailboats move across the water. For the first time in years, she felt something resembling peace. 3 months later, during a warm June morning scented with blooming flowers and fresh rain, Vanessa welcomed her daughter into the world. The moment she held the tiny bundle in her arms, everything changed. The fear, the heartbreak, the uncertainty. None of it vanished completely, but it suddenly became smaller. Her daughter's eyes opened briefly, revealing a deep shade of blue that stole Vanessa's breath. Ethan's eyes. For a moment, old pain stirred. Then the baby wrapped tiny fingers around hers, and love replaced every other emotion. She named her daughter Ava Grace Brooks. Grace because it was the one thing that had carried them through the storm. The months that followed were filled with sleepless nights, lullabies, and first smiles. The brownstone gradually transformed into a home overflowing with warmth. Toys appeared in corners. Children's books filled shelves. Photographs lined the mantel. Vanessa discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. She was mother and protector, teacher and comforter, builder of a new life. On Ava's first birthday, Vanessa stood in the backyard beneath strings of white lights while friends gathered around a small cake decorated with soft pink roses. Laughter filled the evening air. Ava giggled from her high chair. Looking around at the simple celebration, Vanessa realized something extraordinary. The life she thought she lost had never truly been her greatest blessing. Sometimes the ending of one story is simply the beginning of a better one. 5 years passed with the quiet determination of seasons changing beyond a window. Chicago became more than a refuge. It became proof that a life rebuilt with purpose could be stronger than the one that had been lost. Vanessa no longer spent her days looking backward. Every morning began before sunrise with Ava curled beside her, asking questions about clouds, birds, and the endless possibilities hidden inside each new day. The little girl possessed a natural curiosity that filled every room with energy. Her laughter became the soundtrack of the brownstone, replacing memories that once lingered in silence. Professionally, Vanessa had accomplished something few people thought possible. What began as small consulting projects for local nonprofit organizations evolved into something much larger. She founded the Grace Future Initiative, a scholarship network dedicated to helping underprivileged students pursue higher education. The mission grew rapidly. Donations multiplied. Partnerships expanded across multiple states. Within 5 years, the organization supported thousands of students from communities often overlooked by traditional programs. National media began taking notice. Magazine covers featured her story. Business journals praised her leadership. Television interviews highlighted her commitment to education and opportunity. Yet Vanessa remained unchanged. She still drove the same modest vehicle. She still attended community meetings personally. She still remembered every student whose life had been transformed through the program. Success had not hardened her. It had refined her. One autumn afternoon, sunlight poured through the headquarters of the Grace Future Initiative as Vanessa reviewed scholarship applications from across the country. Framed photographs lined her office shelves. Most featured students crossing graduation stages. Others showed Ava smiling beneath summer skies or holding trophies from school competitions. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Her assistant entered carrying a gold-embossed envelope. "This arrived from New York," she explained. Vanessa accepted it politely. The invitation came from the National Children's Hope Foundation, one of the largest charitable organizations in the country. Their annual fundraising gala attracted business leaders, philanthropists, politicians, and media personalities from around the world. This year's event would celebrate educational advancement and community leadership. Vanessa had been selected as the keynote honoree. She stared at the invitation for several moments. New York, the city she had not visited in years. The city where her old life still existed in memories and headlines. That evening, after dinner, Ava sat at the kitchen island coloring pictures while Vanessa reread the invitation. "What are you thinking about?" Ava asked. Vanessa smiled. "A trip." The little girl's eyes widened immediately. "An adventure trip?" "Maybe." Ava considered this carefully before nodding with complete confidence. "Then we should go." Children possessed a remarkable ability to simplify complicated decisions. Vanessa laughed softly and kissed the top of her daughter's head. Weeks later, preparations began. Tailored speeches, travel arrangements, media requests. The event promised to be one of the largest public appearances of her career. Meanwhile, across the country, Ethan Whitmore sat alone inside a Manhattan office overlooking the same skyline he once believed he controlled. The years had brought success to his companies, but little peace to his personal life. His relationship with Olivia had collapsed long ago beneath the weight of mistrust and ambition. Regret followed him through boardrooms and penthouses alike. Yet he still carried one unanswered question. Why had Vanessa left that envelope behind on the night everything ended? Soon, fate would place both of them beneath the same chandeliers once again. Neither realized that a little girl with blue eyes was about to change everything. The Grand Regency Ballroom had not changed. Crystal chandeliers still scattered golden light across polished marble floors. String music floated through the air with practiced elegance. Manhattan's most influential guests filled the room in tailored suits and designer gowns, exchanging conversations worth millions beneath ceilings painted with scenes of triumph and legacy. Yet for Vanessa, the evening felt entirely different from the galas she once attended as Ethan Whitmore's wife. This time she entered as herself, as the founder of the Grace Future Initiative, as a woman whose success belonged to no one else. A soft murmur traveled through the ballroom when she arrived. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Cameras followed. Vanessa wore a deep crimson gown that moved like liquid silk beneath the lights. Not because she wished to revisit the past, but because she no longer feared it. Beside her walked 6-year-old Ava in a simple ivory dress with a matching ribbon woven through her curls. The child gazed around the room with wide-eyed wonder. "It looks like a castle," Ava whispered. Vanessa smiled. "A very expensive castle." Ava giggled. The sound instantly softened Vanessa's nerves. Across the ballroom, Ethan Whitmore had been engaged in conversation with Foundation board members when the laughter reached him. Something about it caused him to turn. His eyes found Vanessa immediately. For a moment, the noise of the room disappeared. 5 years vanished. The regret he carried every day returned with brutal clarity. Vanessa looked radiant, strong, untouchable. But it was not Vanessa who captured his attention next. It was the little girl holding her hand. Ethan frowned slightly. The child looked familiar in a way he could not explain. Then Ava glanced toward the ballroom lights. Her blue eyes caught the glow of the chandeliers. Ethan's heartbeat stumbled. The resemblance lasted only a second, yet something inside him shifted. Before he could understand why, the evening program began. Guests moved toward their tables while Foundation leaders took the stage. Awards were presented. Scholarships were announced. Applause echoed repeatedly throughout the hall. Finally, the master of ceremonies stepped forward. "Tonight, we honor a woman whose vision has changed thousands of lives." The audience rose to their feet as Vanessa approached the podium. The standing ovation seemed endless. Ethan joined the applause automatically, unable to look away. Vanessa delivered her speech with the same grace that had once made him fall in love with her. She spoke about opportunity, resilience, and the power of believing in people when they could not yet believe in themselves. There was no bitterness in her words, no trace of old wounds, only wisdom earned through hardship. When the speech concluded, the audience erupted again. Then came a surprise announcement. The foundation had prepared a short presentation featuring scholarship recipients whose lives had been transformed through Vanessa's work. One by one, students crossed the stage. The final participant was the youngest. "Please welcome Ava Brooks," the presenter announced warmly. The little girl stepped onto the stage carrying a drawing nearly as large as herself. Laughter swept through the audience. Ava approached the microphone confidently. "My mommy says helping people is how you make the world brighter." More laughter followed, along with affectionate applause. Ethan felt something tighten inside his chest. He watched Ava smile beneath the lights, watched the familiar shade of blue in her eyes, watched the way she tilted her head while speaking. Every instinct told him he was seeing something important, something impossible. As Ava held up her colorful drawing of children standing beneath a sunrise, Ethan realized he could no longer dismiss the feeling growing within him. For the first time in 5 years, a question emerged that refused to leave. Who exactly was Ava Brooks? Long after the gala ended, Ethan remained alone in his office overlooking Manhattan. The city shimmered beyond the glass walls, but his attention never left the photograph displayed on his phone. Someone from the foundation's media team had uploaded pictures from the event. Most guests admired Vanessa's speech. Ethan stared only at one image, Ava standing beside her mother beneath the chandeliers. The resemblance that had unsettled him all evening refused to disappear. The tilt of her head, the color of her eyes, even the way she smiled. By midnight, curiosity had transformed into something far heavier. The next morning, Ethan called Marcus Reed, the attorney who had handled his divorce years earlier. "There is something I need to know," Ethan said quietly. Marcus hesitated before responding. "Some truths arrive with consequences." Ethan stared through the window. "Tell me anyway." Silence followed. Then Marcus exhaled slowly. "Do you remember the envelope Vanessa left behind?" Ethan's chest tightened instantly. Of course he remembered. For 5 years that unanswered question had haunted him. He had discovered the envelope only after Vanessa disappeared from New York. By then, she refused every attempt at contact. The contents had changed his life. I remember, Ethan said. Marcus paused. Then you already know what was inside. Ethan closed his eyes. Inside that ivory envelope had been medical confirmation of a pregnancy. The child they had hoped for throughout their marriage. The child he never knew existed until after Vanessa was gone. The memory struck him with the same force it had 5 years earlier. He remembered sitting alone in the penthouse, staring at the report, while realization shattered everything he thought he understood. On the very night Vanessa intended to give him the happiest news of their lives, he had destroyed their future. Ava is 6 years old, Marcus said carefully. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. The room seemed to tilt. Every calculation happened instantly. Every date aligned perfectly. Every unanswered question found its place. Ethan lowered himself into a chair as the truth settled over him like a wave he could not escape. Ava was not simply Vanessa's daughter. Ava was his daughter. His. The word echoed through his mind. For several moments he could not speak. Images flooded his memory. The little girl standing proudly on stage. Her laughter. Her blue eyes reflecting the ballroom lights. The drawing she held in her hands. The confidence in her voice. Every detail became unbearable. Ethan looked toward the skyline, but all he could see was the life he had missed. 6 birthdays. First steps. First words. School recitals. Bedtime stories. Every milestone belonged to memories he would never recover. Why did she never tell me? He finally whispered. Marcus answered gently. Perhaps because she believed trust mattered more than biology. The words cut deeper than any accusation. After ending the call, Ethan sat alone for hours. The office gradually darkened as evening approached. Across the desk rested a framed photograph from years ago. Vanessa wearing a crimson dress at a charity gala. Smiling beside him. Believing in him. Loving him. Ethan reached for the frame. For the first time, he understood the full cost of what he had done. He had not only lost a wife. He had lost a family. And somewhere in Chicago, a little girl with his eyes was growing up without ever knowing the man who should have been there from the beginning. The first snow of December drifted gently across Chicago when Ethan arrived at the headquarters of the Grace Future Initiative. He stood outside for several minutes before entering, watching volunteers carry boxes of donated books through the front doors. 5 years earlier, he would have walked into any building with certainty. Today, he carried only humility. Vanessa was reviewing scholarship proposals when her assistant quietly informed her that a visitor wished to speak with her. She already knew who it was before hearing the name. Some moments announced themselves long before they arrive. Ethan entered her office slowly. Time had changed them both. The arrogance that once surrounded him had vanished. The grief remained visible in his eyes. Vanessa looked up from her desk calmly. Neither spoke for several seconds. Outside the office windows, snowflakes floated against the gray afternoon sky. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I know about Ava. Vanessa folded her hands together and nodded once. There was no surprise in her expression. Only acceptance. Ethan lowered his gaze. I should have known 6 years ago. His voice carried the weight of countless sleepless nights. I should have been there for every moment. Vanessa remained quiet. Some truths required no response. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and carefully removed a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn from being handled too often. It was the pregnancy report from the envelope she had left behind. The document he had carried for 5 years. I read this more times than I can count, he said softly. Every time hoping I could somehow change what happened. For the first time, emotion flickered across Vanessa's face. Not anger. Not bitterness. Simply sadness for a future that had never been given a chance. Ethan looked directly at her. I am not asking you to come back to me. The words seemed difficult, but honest. I lost that right a long time ago. Vanessa studied him carefully. The man standing before her was not the same man who had shattered their marriage. Pain had taught him lessons success never could. Then why are you here? She asked. Ethan's eyes softened. Because I would like the opportunity to know my daughter. Silence filled the office once more. Beyond the glass walls, volunteers continued their work. Students laughed in the hallway. Life moved forward as it always did. Vanessa thought about the years behind them. The betrayal, the loneliness, the rebuilding. She thought about Ava and the questions that would eventually come. Then she thought about Grace. Not the easy kind. The difficult kind. The kind that asks people to choose healing over revenge. Being a father is not a title, Vanessa said quietly. It is a responsibility. Ethan nodded immediately. I understand. No, she replied gently. You are only beginning to. Another silence passed. Then Vanessa stood and walked toward the office door. Through the hallway windows, a small figure could be seen coloring at a nearby table while waiting for school pickup. Ava. Ethan's breath caught. Vanessa looked back at him. You may meet her. Hope appeared in his eyes so suddenly it almost seemed painful. Thank you. Vanessa offered a faint smile. Warm but distant. Kind but final. A smile that acknowledged the past without returning to it. Together they walked toward the hallway. Ava looked up from her coloring book and smiled brightly at her mother. Then her curious blue eyes shifted toward the unfamiliar man standing beside her. As Ethan knelt to introduce himself, Vanessa stepped back and watched quietly. Snow continued falling beyond the windows. A new chapter was beginning, but not the one Ethan once imagined. Some love stories end. Some families survive anyway. And sometimes the greatest victory is not making someone regret losing you. It is becoming someone whose happiness no longer depends on their regret. As mother and daughter later walked hand in hand through the softly falling snow, the future stretched before them bright and unwritten, while behind them stood a man finally learning the value of what he had lost and the privilege of what he had been given a chance to rebuild.